Well, good morning again. I want to start this morning's talk with a reading from the Lotus Sutra, um, one of the earliest Mahayana sutras written in the first centuries of this common era, and one of the most important because of the diversity of ideas that it presents. So if you would put your hands in Hapchong, please, palm to palm, and listen if you would. This is a Mahayana Sutra, one of the first. At that time, the world honored one, surrounded by the four kinds of believers, received offerings and tokens of respect, and was honored and praised. And for the sake of the bodhisattvas, he preached this great vehicle sutra entitled Immeasurable Meanings, a law to instruct the bodhisattvas, a sutra that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. When the Buddha had finished preaching this sutra, he sat with his legs crossed in lotus position and entered into the samadhi of the place of immeasurable meanings, his body and his mind never moving. At that time, heaven rained down mandavara flowers, great mandavara flowers, manjushaka flowers, great manjushaka flowers, scattering them all over the Buddha and over this great assembly. And everywhere the Buddha world quaked and trembled in 6 different ways. At that time, the monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnaras, margas, human and non-human beings in this assembly, as well as the petty kings and the wheel-turning sage kings, all those in this great assembly, having gained what they had never had before, were filled with joy, and pressing their palms together, gazed at the Buddha with a single mind. End of the reading. Gazed at the Buddha with a single mind. You know, I hear all these various beings, and my mind wants to go, right. Well, I'll agree with the 4 classes of Buddhist followers, but I don't know about the yakshas, the gandharvas, the asuras, and whatnot. It sounds kind of like fairy tales where we have all of these mythological characters who are involved. And they're sweet, fun stories, but how true are they? And I think we got to look a little bit beyond that. As it says this last line, gazed at the Buddha, all beings in the 6 realms, gazed at the Buddha with a single mind, a unified mind, one mind, which means an unfiltered mind, an unhindered mind, the purpose of why we're practicing for that same type of mind. St. Thomas Aquinas, the Dominican monk, scholar in the 13th century said, "To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible." So I want to talk this morning a little bit about faith, but faith not as you assenting to a certain set of beliefs or dogmas or doctrines, but faith as possibility. Faith as possibility. I want to make a few comments about the intersection of science and spirituality. Not that I do a lot of reading on cosmological issues, but it seems like the past few months there's been quite a bit that I've read, and don't pretend to understand it all by any means. But it seems that there's sort of a crisis in cosmology, and physicists that for years and decades have accepted certain laws of the way the universe works. All of a sudden, when they get these measurements that don't respond with the way the universe is supposed to work, they say, what the hell's going on? I mean, what is this? Do we have to, reinvent all of our laws of general relativity and quantum mechanics? What is it? And this past week, I read an abstract of an article that's going to be published or was just recently published. And the physicists who present this, and they are physicists, they're not theologians. The physicists who present this article say that as far as they're concerned, it is virtually impossible for the complexity of what has transpired on Earth, what has evolved on Earth, to have come about by simply random interaction of things in the universe. It would take at least a multiverse, an infinite number of universes, randomly bouncing back and forth and interacting for the complexity of human, animal, life organisms as we find them right now. They didn't say it's impossible, but they say it's highly improbable, which then leads them to say we have to consider the possibility of intelligent design. Now, this isn't anything new. They're not using the word God. They're just using the phrase intelligent design. That there is something, some sort of purposeful, directed energy that began this process that has unfolded into what we have now. They said that makes sense. They have no proof of it, but they said just look at the other. It just doesn't seem that randomness, that mere chance would end up with what we have right now. Well, I want to tell you a little story. 1958, I would have been 11 years old. And I went running into my house. It was early evening. I said, Mom, Dad, Mr. Nagel. He was our next door neighbor. He worked for Ford Motor Company. I said, Mr. Nagel just drove in his driveway and he's got a brand new car. It's an Edsel. And I said, it's orange. And my folks are like, orange? Now, Harry Nagel was a very mild-mannered, quiet man, not outspoken at all, and they could not believe that he would buy an orange Edsel. And so we all went over there, and I said, look at it. Look at this orange Edsel. And they said, orange? It's green. I saw it as orange. And it's one of the first times when they realized that indeed, I guess I was colorblind, red-green colorblind, which later observations proved to be true. I prefer color weak. I hate that idea of colorblind, but I am red-green, color weak. And you could put a hunter in the middle of a green forest in hunter orange, and he disappears to me. I don't see it. I just don't see it. So anyhow, I have this physical filter that I was born with. I have this genetic mutation. And my eyes don't see red and green like a lot of people see red and green. Although now they make these special glasses that cost a few $100s for red-green color blindness. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's a physical filter. And we all have different sorts of physical filters. We're born into a certain family, into a certain race, into a certain location, into a certain tradition. We're born we develop certain teachers along the way. And we develop these filters based on our experiences. And so we see reality based on our encounters with all sorts of different people and different experiences that we've had from the time that we're born. They're mental filters. As I said before, our practice, our Buddhist practice, is to try and get rid of as many of those mental filters as we can so that we can see pure reality as it really is, not as we want it to be, but as it really is. And we can all agree on one mind. Well, I don't remember what year it was. It was either, I think it was 2002, early 2003. Anyhow, we at Still Point Zen Buddhist Temple in Detroit, we went out to a retreat center in Metamora, Windrise, Windrise Retreat Center. And it was a week-long Young Main Junction. Young Main Junction means fearless practice, intense meditation practice. It was, as the Benedictine rule says, ora et labora, prayer and work, except ours was meditation and work. And the owner of the retreat center, she made a deal because it was going to be fairly expensive for each of us to make the retreat there, a week-long retreat. And she said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you guys a discount if you'll do work. We need a lot of physical labor done around here. And we had to work on the gardens, hauling all kinds of loads of dirt and edging, and we put up split rail fencing, and this was in between our meditation. And the whole retreat is in silence, except for the time where you've got to talk when you're working and you have to relay some instructions or something. But otherwise, it's all in silence. And it's pretty intense. And it was, I guess, the last night, the sixth night before we were going to leave the next day. And we had a really intensive 3-hour from 7 until 10 p.m. that night, sitting in the main Dharma hall. And at the end of it, we had what we called tiger practice. And you take your personal private practice, whatever it is, and for me, it's always been chanting. I really like chanting and found my mind being calmed as I'm chanting out loud, believe it or not, because you don't have that mind that's jumping from branch to branch. Now, I got to tell you something. I had just come out of surgery 2 days before the retreat started, when I had a bone taken from my wrist and 4 other bones fused. So I had a cast from my knuckles to halfway up my arm here above my elbow. And so my teacher had said, listen, Gary, I don't want you working. You just take it easy. Well, I laughed and it's like, Prong, that's not me. I don't just not work. I said, I can't just sit. I need to be doing something. He said, no, you're going to screw up your arm. I said, no, I'm going to work. And so I did the same stuff that everybody else did. Dug dirt, worked on the fencing, and used my hand as if it were functional. And so my practice was chanting, and I had a moktak holding this thing like this. And I don't know how long we went, probably 20, 30 minutes, everybody with their own practice, to the point literally of exhaustion. Sweat pouring out everywhere and just beat down. And we called it a night, go up to bed. But a few of us went outside on the grass, and we just needed to decompress and just kind of take in what had just happened, not just that night, but the whole week. And we're just laying there, and it's a dark night. There's no moon out, at least none that we could see. And I decided that I was going to take a little walk. There was a dirt path that went down past the horse barns and the tool sheds, and went down to a small pond. This is a 150-acre retreat center. And the woman who owned it lived way, way, way in the back. And so I'm kind of feeling my way along this path with my feet. And all of a sudden, up on the right at the edge of the path and where the weeds were growing and the forest was, I see this thing, the circular thing. And it's shining. And it's not just shining, but it's like undulating light. I mean, it's like this thing is alive. And so, I majored in biology in college, and I had botany courses. So, I knew that there were these bioluminescent plants, like mushrooms. And I thought, well, it's a bioluminescent mushroom. I'll be damned. I've never seen one. And so I'm looking at this thing, and it's like, that's not a mushroom. What the hell is it? And the light in it is just, and I'm like, I have no idea. And I thought, I'm getting a little freaked out, to be real honest with you. I thought, I'm going to touch this thing. And I figure I'm going to just reach out and kind of touch behind it. And I reach out there, and something, I don't know what, but I didn't touch something, but something touched me and pushed my fingers away. Literally pushed my fingers away. Well, I want to tell you something. I thought I was going to pass out. I kid you not. I was scared. I'm like, what is this? I mean, a plant, a mushroom is alive, but this thing seems to be alive and is telling me to get away. And I don't know of any mushroom that's going to push my hand away. And I thought, I'm going to go down to the lake and I'm going to see if it's here when I come back. So I went down to the lake and spent a little bit of time down there, sitting on the bench. I thought, okay, I'm going to go see if it's there again and see if I can touch it again. It wasn't there. I mean, whatever it was gone. And I was perplexed. My interest was piqued. My imagination was piqued. And so the next day, as we're kind of cleaning up and whatnot, the owner of the retreat center, Estella, she's quite a renowned sculptor. She went to Center for Creative Studies. She's from Argentina. Estella Boudreau is her name now. Estella Rodriguez was her name. And she was also trained she trained at the Shalom Institute for Spiritual Formation. And her specialty was contemplative prayer. And I said, Estella, my name's so-and-so. I said, here's what I experienced last night. I said, what was it? Just nonchalantly. She said, that was a fairy. And I'm like, she said, consider yourself fortunate. And she just walked away. And I'm like, yeah, right. A fairy. I mean, it wasn't a mushroom, but a fairy? And it was a couple of months later, I got a phone call from her. And she had gotten my contact information from my teacher, Parong at Stoll Point. And she said, listen, Kogam was my Dharma name. She says, Kogam, I want to buy a lunch somewhere and talk with you. Where should we go? And so we met over at Old Port Inn in Clawson on 14 Mile Road. She bought me lunch. And she says, because of your work ethic, what I saw you doing with that hand that had just been operated on, and because of your experience, she said, I would like you to consider to come working for me as soon as you're ordained. She said, I want to develop just a whole lot more on the property. So we talked about what we were looking for. I was looking for something like this, where you work directly with people, their issues, their problems, their growth in spiritual direction. And she was looking for someone to lead, facilitate retreats, group retreats, plan group retreats, get this place really well known as a marriage place and an entertainment venue. And that just wasn't what I was looking for. Plus, it would have meant moving to her property. Now, she had a cabin right in the middle of this property there. And I could have lived there. But, I was gone through a divorce and, had a son and had a veterinary clinic that I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with. So I said, Estella, I really appreciate it, but, it's just not going to work for us. And she was very kind about it. A fairy. Well, there is a church father in the Christian tradition. He lived in the 200s roughly. His name was Origen. And Origen believed in basically reincarnation. Most of the rest of the church didn't, but he believed in reincarnation. And a couple hundred years later, he's called a heretic and kicked out of the church. He's no longer a church father. But he also believed that nature, streams and mountains and trees and whatnot, that there are, as he said, husbandmen and guardians that we may not see with the naked eye, but they take care of everything. They are part of our environment. We may not see them, but they're beings. They're created beings. There is a Eastern Orthodox theologian, philosopher, lover of baseball, writer of all sorts of stories, really, really well known, whose basic thing is, what is the nature of God and how do we and God interact with one another? And he lives in South Bend. He used to teach at Notre Dame. He was on staff there. And his name is David Bentley Hart. And he went a number of years ago to Mount Athos in Greece, which of course is where all the Eastern Orthodox monasteries are, the monks live. And he had some sort of mystical experience. I just want to quote you what he has said. I was in this state of spiritual despair, and I also had an encounter. So I understand both the difficulty of explaining it and the impossibility of forgetting it, yet how it can change your life. But it doesn't come with a set of instructions. It sure as hell didn't turn me into a saint, but it did actually make me realize that the spiritual dimension of reality is reality. Now, David Bentley Hart is a believer in fairies. He's a believer in other things that most people would say are nonsense. I think we have to learn to be open. As I know Shinmyo is, and I opened her mind to this by giving her the name. Shinmyo, mystical mind, because I know her history. There are things that happen. There are ways of being in this universe that we don't understand. With filters in place, with closed minds, with small mind, with little mind, we hurt ourselves. We only hurt ourselves. As we start to remove those filters with our Buddhist practice, we start to see things in a different way, from a different perspective. We become as of one mind. Now, you might say this sounds like a lot of work. Doing a Youngmain Junction, a 5 or 7 day retreat, is intense. And you come out of it changed, though. One of our Korean Buddhist founders, one of the great masters in the 1100s was Master Chinua. And he said, it is not that we cannot do it. In other words, work towards manifesting our own natural Buddhahood. It is only that we do not do it. Our choice. May blessings abound for all of us.